Hello and welcome live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Gautam Roy. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Bangladesh court in Chittagong accepts petition to expedite Indian religious figure Chinmoy Das's bail hearing. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken reaches Jordan as part of his latest West Asia tour after the overthrowing of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Defiant South Korean President Yoon refuses to step down to face second impeachment vote on Saturday, vows to fight to the end. And D. Gukesh and Ding Lijen slug it out for a final time at the World Chess Championship. Another draw means the match goes into sudden death. Now first, let's get you all the updates from Bangladesh, where the Chattogram Metropolitan Sessions Court has accepted senior lawyer Rabindra Ghosh's petition to expedite Chinmoy Krishna Das's bail hearing. The court has accepted the petition on a condition to have a lawyer from Chattogram to stand with Ghosh during the hearing. Rabindra Ghosh subsequently recruited a local lawyer, Sumit Acharya, to stand with him. That's how the information has come in. Now, the move comes a day after the court dismissed an anticipatory bail application for Das, citing the absence of a power of attorney from a Chattogram Bar Association member. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is on a trip to Jordan and Turkiye, aiming to unite regional countries around a shared vision for Syria's future. This comes after the ousting of Syria's longtime authoritarian leader Bashar al-Assad. The top US diplomat's trip focuses on supporting an inclusive Syrian-led transition to a government that is both accountable and representative. He'll discuss the importance of preventing Syria from becoming a base for terrorism or posing a threat to neighboring countries. Besides ensuring that a secure and safe destruction of chemical or biological weapons stockpiles also takes place. Secretary Blinken will also emphasize that displaced Syrians in the region will continue to need access to protection. Also in that country, a caretaker prime minister linked to the rebel group that toppled longtime dictator Bashar al-Assad's regime has been appointed to oversee the transition of power. Latakia city residents have welcomed the opposition forces with celebrations as well. Meanwhile, the country's Baath party, which had been led by Assad's family for decades, is suspending its work and activities until further notice. The main commander of the fighters have said that he would dissolve the security forces of the former regime, close its prisons and hunt down anyone involved in torture or killing of detainees. For the refugees, the prospect of returning home has brought a mixture of joy and grief over hardships in exile. Syrians lined up at the Turkish border on Wednesday to head home. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said there were signs of hope in Syria following the overthrow of President Bashar al-Assad by rebel forces over the weekend. Guterres said that the United Nations is committed to a smooth transition of power in Syria.
As we speak, we are witnessing the reshaping of the Middle East, with the changes in the correlation of forces among the key regional actors, with the immense tragedy of the Palestinian people, whose right for self-determination and whose right to have their own state must be constantly reaffirmed. But we also see some signs of hope, and signs of hope namely coming from the end of the Syrian dictatorship.
Now, history is indeed being made in Syria. Just days after the end of the Assad regime, a new government is trying to shape the nation's future. That begs the question, who can they really count on, as millions have fled Syria over the past decades? Now, one of the countries that a lot of people from Syria fled to is Germany. Lars Holter is with Deutsche Welle and joins me from Berlin for more on this. Now, Lars, hi, how are you, and what are you hearing about Syrians in Germany and how they're looking at the current developments back home?
Thanks for having me. Well, let me start with a number. At last count in October, there were 974,136 Syrians in Germany, and around a third of them was actually working here too. Now, there's obviously a political aspect to the current discussion over their future. First of all, Germany has suspended accepting any more Syrians from coming to Germany, as the country is obviously not in a civil war right now, and there is no humanitarian reason any longer for people to flee. Now, taking it one step further, conservative politicians have already called for Syrians to leave Germany as soon as possible and return to their homeland. That is obviously populism at its best. Politicians catering to those on the right who have long been frustrated over the rising numbers of migrants in Germany and the amount of money Germany spends to care for them. However, on the other hand, those politicians aren't entirely wrong. Syria's new leader, Mohammed al-Bashir, has also called upon people to return home, saying that they are needed now to rebuild the country, which he is calling a free country that has its pride and dignity back. Now, pride and dignity is a good start, but you also need an economy, and I guess that's why he's trying to encourage people to come back.
Well, certainly. Now, Lars, just tell us if these 900,000+ people were to leave Germany, what would the impact be in Germany of this sort of an exodus?
Likely not. Like I said, in some sectors it would, like in rural healthcare, but the number of Syrians, and especially Syrians in the labor market, is much smaller than the numbers we've been registering from other countries. All in all, there are over 5 million migrants working in Germany. So generally, Syrians make up under 1% of the workforce in pretty much all sectors of the economy. Also, nobody really thinks, of course, that all of them will be leaving. Now, I would actually agree that many of them should probably leave for the sake of their own country, because Syria stands a much better chance to build up its own economy and its future if many of those often highly qualified people would be back to help. But at the same time, many of them have built a life here over the years. Many have married, they have had children here who feel obviously a lot more German than Syrian if they were born here. Many have achieved German citizenship too. So it doesn't look like we're seeing a mass exodus of people going back to Syria, and thus we will likely not see much of a drain on our economy here.
Yes, as it is, things will take time for people to know in which direction is the country moving. Lars Holter, thank you for joining us from Berlin. Now, a renewed push to secure a Gaza ceasefire and free Israeli hostages is on the agenda as well. The optimism follows U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan's talks with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu on Thursday, ahead of his visits to Egypt and Qatar, key mediators in the deal. Meanwhile, the UN General Assembly has adopted a resolution demanding an immediate, unconditional Gaza ceasefire, with 158 votes in favor, 9 against, including the US and Israel, and 13 abstentions. Washington has insisted on the idea of making a ceasefire conditional on the release of all hostages in Gaza, saying otherwise that Hamas has no incentive to free those in captivity.
The messages we send to the world through these resolutions matter, and both of these resolutions have significant problems. One rewards Hamas and downplays the need to release the hostages, and the other denigrates Israel without providing a path forward to increasing humanitarian assistance to Palestinian civilians.
Now, ahead of the vote, Israel's UN envoy Danny Danon said that this vote is not a vote for compassion but a vote for complicity.
By voting for these resolutions, you are not voting to protect humanitarian values, but to protect an organization that has become a haven for terror. You vote for the resolutions knowing the truth, knowing that UNRWA is not a neutral actor, but an entity hopelessly infiltrated by Hamas.
Now, dozens of representatives of UN member states addressed the assembly before the vote to offer their support to the Palestinians.
Gaza today is the bleeding heart of Palestine and open, painful wound for the human family. Stop the bleeding and restore life in Gaza so it can be once again the beating heart of Palestine. Stop the bleeding so we can restore credibility to our international system, so we can ensure it for future generations, so our people can live, so our region can thrive, so that international peace and security can be preserved.
A UN resolution urging Israel to respect UNRWA's mandate and allow its operations was adopted Wednesday as well, with 159 votes in favor, 9 against and 11 abstentions. Israel plans to ban UNRWA from the 28th of next month, citing claims that some of its staff have been involved in Hamas's deadly attack. Israeli forces have started their withdrawal from a town in southern Lebanon, marking a significant step in a ceasefire deal that took effect on the 27th of last month. As part of this agreement, the Lebanese military and United Nations peacekeepers will deploy in the region, while the Israeli army will continue its withdrawal over the next 60 years. Meanwhile, Hezbollah is also expected to withdraw its forces north of the Litani River and dismantle its military infrastructure in southern Lebanon. Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati has welcomed this development, saying that the deployment of Lebanese troops is a crucial step towards strengthening the army's development in the south and implementing the ceasefire decision. Despite these developments, both sides have accused each other of violating the ceasefire agreement. In another update, a shooting attack on a bus in the West Bank has left 4 people injured, including one Israeli boy who's in a critical condition. In a statement, the Israeli military said a terrorist opened fire at an Israeli civilian bus in the area of the El Khadr junction. As a result of the attack, a number of civilians were injured and are currently receiving medical treatment. The area of Bethlehem had been encircled in pursuit of the assailant. Now, in a provocative move, Ukraine recently fired US-made ATACMS missiles in Russian territory, which has garnered a response from Russia. Russia's defense ministry said that the attack will not go unanswered and appropriate response will be given. It's being speculated that Russia could launch another hypersonic ballistic missile against Ukraine in the coming days. It's to be noted that Ukraine had struck a military airfield on the Azov Sea with 6 US-made ATACMS ballistic missiles on Wednesday. Meanwhile, Russian forces claim to have retaken control over the settlement of Novoivanovka in Kursk region on Thursday. Ukrainian forces seized a chunk of the territory in the region in a surprise incursion on the 6th of August. Now, demonstrators continued flocking the streets in Tbilisi and chanting slogans against the new government as protests enter into its 14th day. While the government is making crackdowns, claiming violence by protesters, the latter deny, saying they are only retaliating against the police's attacks. Meanwhile, the European Union has warned the government of consequences for actions against protesters. Protests erupted in the Black Sea nation after Georgia's recent decision to shelve talks of accession into the European Union until 2028. And still to come on this edition of DD India Live. Pakistan's former Prime Minister Imran Khan and his wife Bushra Bibi are indicted in another graft case in Islamabad. And pressure mounts on global tech giants as Australia decides to charge them if they don't pay for news content. Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Gautam Roy. The Indian Space Research Organization, that's the Indian Space Agency, has successfully carried out a critical sea-level hot test of its CE-20 cryogenic engine at ISRO's propulsion complex in Tamil Nadu last month. The indigenous CE-20 cryogenic engine is powering the upper stage of the LVM-3 launch vehicle, also known as Stage 3 Space Launch Vehicle. This engine has successfully powered the upper stage of 6 LVM-3 missions till now, including Chandrayaan-2, Chandrayaan-3 and the upcoming Gaganyaan mission. The CE-20 engine remains central to future missions, paving the way for greater achievements in space for India. Now, Day 2 of the Global Economic Policy Forum 2024 is underway in New Delhi, addressing a session on building new and sustainable urban centres. Economic Advisory Council of the Prime Minister's member Sanjeev Sanyal said, urban spaces in India need to be designed to accommodate more density of population in a holistic manner.
The critical point about sustainable cities is density. There can be large densities, there can be small densities, but they need to be dense. We tend to get into this conversation about, oh, we need to decongest, which is short form for going and occupying farmland, forest land, and other non-urban areas and capturing it into the urban space. This, in fact, is the source of much of our urbanism going wrong.
Addressing the session, Ambassador of Finland to India, Kimmo Lahde-Virta, emphasized on systems approach to urban planning and India's rapidly urbanizing society and how it can benefit from a sustainable approach.
Systems approach to sustainability. Urban planning in this century demands a systems approach that integrates energy, water, waste, mobility and so forth. Treating these elements in isolation is no longer viable. Finland's experience demonstrates that bringing these together creates cities that are not only efficient but are also more livable and sustainable. I think India's rapid urbanization is a unique opportunity to implement such integrated models, both from planning new urban centers to retrofitting existing ones. I think this holistic approach can reduce resource consumption, lower carbon emissions and ensure long-term resilience.
In Pakistan, a special court in Islamabad on Thursday indicted former Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan and his wife Bushra Bibi in a new Toshkhana case. According to media reports, Special Court Central 1 Special Judge Central Shahrukh Arjumand, who presided over the hearing at Adiala Jail in Rawalpindi, framed the charges against Imran Khan and Bushra Bibi. The National Accountability Bureau had initially filed the case. Considering the NAB amendments, the Federal Investigation Agency took over the case and filed its challan in September. Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf founder Imran Khan and Bushra Bibi have received bail in the case. Imran Khan continues to remain behind bars as he has other cases registered against him, while Bushra Bibi remains out of prison. The couple who are accused of causing losses to the National Exchequer through illegal sale of gifts, was arrested in the said case on the 13th of July. This was the same day when they were acquitted in the Iddat case. Now, unrest in South Korea continues as opposition parties and few of the ruling People Power Party members have called the martial law decree unconstitutional. President Yoon has defended his act, saying that it was a step to maintain order in the country. Here's a report on the latest developments in the region.
South Korea is facing a political turmoil since President Yoon Suk Yeol's botched martial law bid last week. The South Korean police on Thursday again conducted a raid on the presidential office to obtain documents and materials as part of a probe, a day after being blocked by the president's security guards. A week after a failed attempt, the president is to face an impeachment vote on Saturday. Defending the imposition of martial law, the president in a television speech vowed to fight for the people until the very last minute.
We must prevent the forces and criminal groups that have led the paralysis of government administration and disorder of national constitution from taking over the state administration and threatening the future of the Republic of Korea. No matter what, I will fight to the end.
The declaration has escalated tensions in the region and generated large protests, with 50,000 protesters calling for Yoon's ouster. While the public has opposed the move, Yoon blames the opposition for the same. Hours after Yoon's statement, South Korea's ruling party leader Han Dong-hoon urged its lawmakers to take a stand for Yoon's suspension.
The president should be immediately excluded from state administration, including the military leadership, as long it has been confirmed that the president has no intention of stepping down early. An immediate suspension of his duties is required.
Opposition parties on Thursday submitted a new bill to the parliament to impeach the president after his attempt to grant sweeping powers to the military failed last week. Amid the turmoil, the fate of the South Korean president remains uncertain. Bureau Report, DD India.
Now, Australia has planned new rules to create a financial incentive for big tech firms to pay Australian media companies for news content on their platforms. The move is described as a news bargaining initiative. It piles pressure on global tech giants like Facebook owner Meta Platforms and Google to pay publishers for content or face the risk of paying millions to continue operations in Australia. The platforms at risk of the charge will be significant social media platforms and search engines with an Australian-based revenue in excess of $250 million. Australia in 2021 passed laws to make the US tech giants to compensate media companies for the links that drive readers and advertising revenue to their platforms. Let's now take a look at some other stories making news around the world as well. Now, a fire broke out at a residential high-rise building in the southern Chinese city of Shenzhen. 16 fire trucks and 80 rescue personnel arrived at the incident site for the rescue operations. Authorities are predicting a gas explosion as the cause of the fire. 3 critically endangered Mekong giant catfish have been found in Cambodia's Mekong River. This rare catch has brought excitement to marine biologists and fisheries administrators. The Mekong giant catfish is one of the largest and rarest freshwater fish in the world. The streets of central Oslo are glowing with lights as hundreds of locals and visitors gathered to celebrate Christmas cheers. Festive decorations illuminated hotels in the city centre ahead of the festival. Now let's get you some sporting updates as well. Well, defending champion Ding Liren of China and his Indian challenger D. Gukesh are squaring off in the 14th and final game of the World Chess Championship in Singapore on Thursday. The duo played out a draw in the 13th game to remain level at 6.5 points each. Both grandmasters have won 2 games each, while The rest of the matches have been drawn. If the final game also ends in a draw, then the title will be decided by a fast-paced tiebreaker game on Friday. Brazil's Iguazu Falls walkway reopened to the public on the 11th of this month after being closed due to the high water flow from recent heavy rains. On the 10th of this month, the water volume surged to 8.15 million litres per second, over 5 times the usual average. Tourists expressed surprise and awe at the dramatic increase in water volume, with some describing it as the most impressive they had seen in years. India's public broadcaster Prasar Bharati has recently launched Waves, entering the field of OTT platforms. Waves provides a complete infotainment ecosystem to digital media and OTT audiences. If you also want great content for free, then download Waves today. And that's all we have for this edition of DD India Live, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. And for those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India's mobile app. It's available on both Android and iOS. You can scan the QR code on the screen and download the app right away. And we'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Gautam Roy, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Live.